Success and failure externally can both be a success internally if it's in alignment with what we value most, which what matters most to us. Some people call it purpose, some people call it values, but it's really being authentic and true to yourself and being really honest as to what matters most to you.
Welcome to P&L, Priorities and Lifestyle, with your host, Rob Schultz. Rob is the founder and president of Schultz Wealth. All opinions expressed by Rob and his guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Schultz Wealth Limited. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Please refer to our website for more information.
Welcome everybody to P&L, Priorities and Lifestyle. I am your host, Rob Schultz, and today I have gold medalist Olympian Adam Kreek from the great country of Canada. Adam, welcome.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to join you to talk about priorities and lifestyle.
Absolutely. We have got a lot to talk about. First of all, I'm kind of giddy and excited because it's not every day I get to talk to a gold medalist. What it was 2008 Beijing Olympics. What do we call it? Heavyweight division? What was it? What's the division they call it? The really big guys like you in crew that row. Yeah.
Well, we I was just flexing for those listening.
Absolutely.
Giving them a flex, an old man flex. I'm an aging Olympic gold medalist, but aging well, I hope. We're technically called heavyweights. There was a lightweight division that I think is being removed from international competition. So heavyweights, I was the second smallest guy in my crew when I rowed. I would train around 220 pounds, race around 208 pounds, and I'm approximately 6'4".
And you were the little guy.
Yeah, I was the little guy. We had big guys like this guy, big giant Malcolm Howard, who is an incredible athlete, inspiring. This guy was, 6'8", an easy, 220, 225 at racing weight. So very, very strong. So I was lucky to have been part of this incredible crew. No one makes it or does anything on their own. And the sport of crew, the sport of rowing is the perfect example of that.
Oh, I totally agree. And I'm looking forward to delving into your experience there. But your success does not end as being a gold medalist. You were on Dateline for an incredible experience where you attempted to cross an ocean with three of your mates. I use the term mates just as an ode to your Canadianism there a little bit. And that's a story in of itself. And you talk about a lot of this in your book, The Responsibility Ethic, which is a fantastic book. This thing has a ton of information in it and a ton of fodder for me to ask you some super fun questions here in a little bit. So you have just continued to succeed, and now you operate as a motivational speaker, correct? All over the countries in the world. Tell us about that experience and some of the other things that you're doing and succeeding in these days.
Yeah, well, we did row across the ocean. We capsized in the Bermuda Triangle, and that's a great way that we open up the book. And that was a failure that actually became a success.
Sure.
And that's one of the biggest learnings in my life as I've gone through the various changes in seasons, the changes in careers, is that success and failure externally can both be a success internally if it's in alignment with what we value most, which what matters most to us. Some people call it purpose, some people call it values, but it's really being authentic and true to yourself and being really honest as to what matters most to you. Where that has led, these two experiences, because my own personal values are along the lines of connecting with people in a very loving and genuine way.
Nice.
I enjoy giving a generous impact wherever I go. And I'm an ambitious achiever. I really value achieving things, things that are tangible, that other people can objectively say, oh, that person achieved something. And so, trying, and I think that speaks to this idea of teamwork and that we don't do anything alone. That pushed me into the world of motivational speaking. Near the end of my Olympic career, I visited hundreds of schools, and then after we won an Olympic medal, I visited hundreds and hundreds of more, and I got into the world of organizational development, helping businesses, business owners, leadership teams build the cultures of their organizations by using my story of going to the Olympics, winning. We didn't talk about this, but 4 years prior, I lost at the Olympics, which was devastating, and and then after we rode across the ocean, that the metaphor of adventure is so applicable to business and life because there are so many more disruptions and unpredictable things that show up, and we can't get through it unless we can build very strong relationships with the people we're attacking our goals alongside. And so the motivational speaking, the keynote speaking, that has been an anchor since 2008, or not necessarily an anchor, more of like a wind in my sail.
There you go. Better analogy.
Yeah, that has pushed me along. And then about a decade ago, I got into executive coaching, business coaching, and strategic planning. And I did that because there was an emptiness that sometimes would show up delivering keynote speeches. I would be out there, I'd be delivering 80, 100 keynotes a year, which was great. But we built a very successful business, which we were very proud of. But there was an element of, again, my values are about building a loving connection and a lasting connection and having a generous impact. So I found that, I was able to, to serve and give in that way, through the inspirational stories and through the motivational speaking, if I had solid relationships in the background. So I have about half a dozen small or more medium-sized businesses that I work with, running strategic planning and business systems, and then have about a dozen other people outside of that I work one-on-one alongside in an executive coaching and business coaching capacity. And so I find the three of those work really well together because I'm able to serve my own values while also, I guess, just tactically, I'm in the trenches. I'm seeing what's happening in business and organizations, on a day-to-day basis. I'm constantly having conversations with, high-performing, high-level executives. And then when I go out to deliver, a keynote, which is, a few times a month, and I've dialed it down. Yeah, so I'm only going out a couple times a month, usually, and then I can actually speak to what I'm seeing on the ground to the people in the room, and it builds a real, authentic connection, as well as just, fulfills my curiosity. How do you build stronger teams? How do you develop adults? How do you serve leaders? How do you build leaders into stronger people? How do you navigate, the streams and the currents of life, of business, of leading people? It's, going to the Olympics was definitely hard, enduring injury, pushing through difficulties, rowing across the ocean, certainly the same. But there was also, obviously the highs of the experience. And the same is true when you're running a business. The same is true when you're building a career.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's go back. I have a huge amount of respect for crew, for your sport, and especially, the team approach where you've got four men on a side, I guess, correct. It's 8 rowers and 1 coxswain. Is that how it works in a boat? The way you did it. Okay, and a couple of things. You tell me if this is what I understand is that this sport. First of all, rowing is a full body workout. I mean, you are using every muscle in your body, and second of all, because you're one of 7 rowers. Everybody has to have the same pace, and it seems, in my understanding is that sometimes you are pushing yourself way, way, way further than you could ever do on your own because of the fact of this pace and this need to keep up with the team. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I don't know if a lot of people understand your sport and how difficult that can be.
Yeah, the rowing is widely known as one of the most difficult sports, if not the most physically demanding sport that is out there.
Yeah.
Anyone who's done CrossFit or sat on a rowing machine at the gym knows that feeling, knows that burn. If you've done middle distance running, middle distance swimming, in that distance or that time between 3 to 7 minutes, that's the zone where we're working in. So from a physiological standpoint, you need to maximize both your aerobic capacity and your anaerobic capacity, which is your ability to create energy with oxygen. And anaerobic, I'm giving you a breath, and anaerobic, the ability for your body to create energy using glycogen, using other less oxygen-centric systems,
Sure.
and you create a lot of this lactic acid, which creates a lot of pain. So rowing does use the entire body. It uses 92% of all the muscles you have in your body to power the stroke. So it's truly a full-body workout. And a lot of people don't recognize, who aren't familiar with the sport, that something like 60% to 70% of the power of a rowing stroke comes from the legs. So a rower will never skip leg day. Yeah.
Okay.
A rower might skip the bench press, and that's what makes them different from many other gym rats. The rower will skip the bench press, but never skip the squat rack. That's what makes them so strong. And it is a team sport. So if you can picture doing a squat with seven other people approximately your size. If you can picture this long bar, if you were to stand up on your own to do that squat, you would be lifting, and you wouldn't be able to lift the weight.
Yeah.
It's the weight of a grand piano. But if all 8 rowers were to stand alongside one another, or all 8 squatters were to stand alongside each other and lift up, you could lift an immense amount of weight together. And that's what you're doing in a rowing boat. But you're doing this, a rowing race is around 220 strokes. So you're doing a clean that's probably about, 120, 140 pounds. So you're cleaning about 140 pounds, 40 times a minute for about 5.5 minutes. That's the equivalent of the physical challenge. Inside a rowing boat, we're all moving together. And I like to say, and I find that it's a good parallel to the working world, because we're working alone together. In a rowing boat, you're sitting there, and it's a sport that favors introverts. I'm more extroverted, so I'm a bit of an anomaly in the sport. Most of my friends and the people who are who really drove me on my team, were much more introverted. They're much more thoughtful, and they in the way that they process information and process things. So they like to think, they like to be alone. But again, we're together and we're working together, and no crew works and no crew achieves its full potential unless you can move together. And when you're in a rowboat, all your body parts are moving together as you're lifting this load together. So the legs are moving together, the backs are moving together, the arms are moving together, the oars are moving together. And you get into this rhythm. You get into this rhythm that is almost intoxicating. And I remember the first time hopping into an international caliber boat, and I get chills just thinking about it right now, is that it took me to another world. Some people have described this as ecstasis, which is, it's close to this idea of ecstasy, but it's an elevated state of being where you're hyper connected with yourself and others and the universe. You feel this strong bond and this strong sense of unworldly presence and power. And I remember in that first boat, we were doing an easy paddle, and I just felt the power of the men around me, of their legs going down, of the acceleration of the boat.
The surge,
the surge and the need and the drive and the desire and the pressing for myself to push harder so that I could keep up with everyone around me. And so it becomes intoxicating, this desire to push, because when everyone around you is pushing, somehow it prompts you to push harder as well. And there's a story that I talk about in the book about doing this exercise. We called it fartlek starts, and it's a funny name, fartlek, which you can imagine. But it's a Swedish word, which fart means go and lek means play. So you go play. And what we would do is we would take this boat from a standstill. So if you think of Newton's laws of physics, moving something from a standstill up to full speed takes an immense amount of energy. It takes less energy to keep the motion in motion than to take the object at rest to put it into motion. So we would take the boat at rest and we put it into full speed. And then we do that over 30 seconds. Then we take a 30-second rest. We dig the blades into the water and stop the boat. And then we do it again and again and again. And so for those of you who are familiar with HIIT or high intensity interval training, we would do this at the end of a very hard work week. So we would have trained for about 30 to 35 hours that week on the water already. We would have spent between 4 to 7 hours on the water. Between 1.5 to 3 hours of those would be at your lactic threshold. For those of you who understand, the physiology of what we're doing, we would have had weight sessions. And so this is the last session of a very hard week in a very hard training cycle. And the benefit you get from this is we would do 10, 20, I think we do 30 of them if my memory serves me correctly. So 30-second pieces. And when you're working through this workout, at first it's short and it's invigorating and it's exciting and you feel the energy of the crew and you start pushing, but you get to somewhere and everybody in that crew and everybody in that boat gets to a point at some time in that workout where they hit that wall.
Absolutely.
They hit that wall. You hit the blackness. You hit the doubt. You hit the, oh my goodness, I don't think I can do this anymore.
Right.
And we can picture that if you've gone for a run or a swim or you've done any of these physical challenges on your own. You get to that point and you have that moment, that internal conversations. Maybe you'll like David Goggins it, and you'll tell yourself to just buck up and go harder. Go into the cookie jar. Just push hard, and you'll push harder. And other times you're like, go into the push. Oh, I can't go into the cookie jar today, and then you stop because sometimes you can push through, sometimes you can't.
Sure.
In a rowing crew. Because if you think of go back to the squat bar, go back to the legs, the arms, the back, the oars, everything moving together, you're in this state of ecstasis. You get to this point where you don't think you can go anymore. And you get to that point, and everybody reaches this, you get to a point where you actually break and you can't go anymore, and you give up, and you fully surrender. But the thing is, you're part of a crew. And the other 7 people, they're going hard. They're pushing their legs down. They're driving their back to the bow. They're driving their arms to the finish. They're pushing that oar, into the water and levering that boat. And you surrender and you keep pulling. You go into the pit, and then the team pulls you through. And you have this experience where all of a sudden it feels like you've gone from the darkness and like overhead this tingling golden light comes down and anoints you with an immense power. And the team that has dragged you through that pit, all of a sudden you are now giving back to that team and you are lifting them up. And it becomes this synergy, it becomes this ecstasy, it becomes this surreal and hard to describe experience of having a white light, a golden light moment shared with the crew. And this would happen not very regularly, but it would happen a few times a year, certainly, as you would get to that point where you could push to that level. And I found higher levels because I was on a team that could help me find that level. And I know that I helped others find that level too by being a part of a team. And it is that give and take. And it's this power of teamwork where 2 plus 2 can actually equal 5 because of the spiritual, intellectual, and physical interdependence and support that everybody gives each other.
Wow, that's intense. That's really intense. So translate that for me a little bit to working with executives, with teams today within business, because obviously what you just described is something that very few people, I would say, have experienced on an athletic level, but yet that is something that I think I can see that you can maybe participate in within a business team to strive to those higher levels. Kind of how do you see that within the business realm?
Well, the physical doesn't always translate into the business realm unless you have a bricklaying company or a ditch digging company. Sometimes or you're a tree planter, you have lots of tree planters or soil samples.
Yeah, but I would say that, I think that because, I've done, like a lot of people, I've done a lot of athletic competition in the past, but I still find that, within business and the mental accomplishments and trying so hard within a team, not from a physical standpoint, but just from a success standpoint, trying to still achieve something can still be very hard and very exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Well, it can be very hard and very exhausting, and it's true. And again, when we share these stories, I share this story of like team ecstasis. It's one point in time that's wonderful and it's unworldly, but it took years and years of grinding in the pit to have that experience.
To find that, yeah.
But to translate that into the business world, we can take what we've learned intellectually, what we've learned relationally, what we've learned mentally, what we've learned from a subconscious values driven orientation. And I think that's where I see it coming into business, because the hard thing about business is hard things. And what makes business the hardest is is learning how to lead and manage and work with other people. Sport is interesting in that there's a lot of objectives and goals that are aligned, but still, even within a crew, different people have different personalities, they have different values, they have different objectives of what they're trying to achieve through this this goal. Obviously, we had alignment that everyone wanted to go for an Olympic gold medal, but buried one level lower, someone wanted to get entry into a university and build their career with this. Someone wanted to prove to themselves and their father that they were good enough. Someone wanted to prove that they could actually just do something. Someone just wanted to write a chapter and be able to look themselves in the mirror and say, "Hey, I did something with my life." Others wanted to take it and use it to build publicity or build a reputation.
Okay.
And so there's lots.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. So everybody obviously is seeking a gold medal, but really it's different goals for different people. And I mean, does this kind of translate to where you talked about in your book about different types of goals, and you talked about toxic goals and some things along those lines? I thought that was very interesting, the way you expressed that in the book. Do you kind of see that as people can be trying to achieve the same thing? Let's get to this gold medal. Let's get to this level of revenue within our business and so forth. But we're doing it for different reasons, and sometimes those are good reasons, and sometimes they're reasons that probably may not work out as well for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly. Well, this is, let's take it to the business world as we're
Yeah.
building a team, because if I'm a business owner, I am highly invested in the success of my business. There will be no one else as invested as me in the success of this business unless I have like a really deep and long-standing partnership with someone where I know them very, very well, and that those partnerships are valuable and they're golden, and you never take them for granted if you ever find that within the business world, because it's incredibly powerful. But for the most part, no one will care about the business, more than you. And sometimes it's hard for the business owner to understand that there are going to be people on your team that will just care less. Some people, especially as your business grows, some people will just show up for a job. They want to have a place that has a decent enough culture that gives them just enough salary. They want to feel good, like they've accomplished something with this work, and then go home and live whatever life they want to live outside of this business or this work that they're doing, with you, with the organization. And so, to understand that there are different values and people do have different goals is very important. And to come back to this idea of toxic goals, and I believe in the book we talked about the toxic goals of wealth, beauty, and fame. Those being three goals that we talked about. Whereas we talked about the Fantastic Four,
Yes.
which I'm blanking on at the moment, but
Maybe I can find it because it was really good.
Yeah, the four goals we talked about were, and I'm just looking it up too. This is chapter 2.
Yeah, it was up in the front.
The fantastic delivering community
Four.
value, building health and wellness, creating authentic relationships, and generating self-awareness.
Yeah.
And so what I've come to realize, is that we have toxic goals, and we have call them the Fantastic Four. And there's been lots of concrete research that's actually been shown that those who pursue toxic goals, which is you're pursuing wealth for its own sake, pursuing fame for its own sake, pursuing beauty, and I'll put sex in there as well, that for its own sake, that it leads to a vapid, empty, unfulfilling life, and it ruins your relationships, and it tends to ruin the lives of the people around you as well. It's bad for your community, it's bad for the environment, it's bad for so many other shared goods. And so what we're talking about when we talk about the Fantastic Four of building self-awareness, building authentic relationships, building your health and wellness, building community value, we're actually talking about values that are contribution-oriented. And often when we talk about organizations, we'll talk about organizational values, and we'll talk about how these values matter. Where teams start to break down, and especially we're talking about a business owner, you will have values that are contribution oriented. But I will say that all of us have shadow values. All of us have values of self-interest. And that's part of the toxic nature of them. It's not that valuing them in and of themselves is not bad, but valuing them without acknowledging where you want to contribute, where you want to what matters to you from a larger contribution, a higher minded standpoint, is very unhealthy, and it actually hinders your success, and it makes you unable to grow. It makes it far harder for you to maintain and sustain success once you have got it, and it makes it very difficult for you to build teams and build success. So when we talk about the toxic goals, and of wealth, beauty and sex, and fame, we often see people who are wealthy, they're beautiful, they're having great sex with their partner, or having sex with lots of partners, and they're and they're famous, and we think, oh, that's like they got that, and I want that, and so
Right.
like I think pursuing those things is what will make me fulfilled, and those people might be fulfilled, and they might be having those experiences in their life because they found the fulfillment and they were able to attract the wealth, they were able to attract the sex and the beauty, they were able to attract the fame, but that was not, like that was not necessarily the end point of what they were going for, and so I think that's the idea of the toxic goals and making sure we're focusing on the Fantastic Four. But I just want to make one final point around values.
Yes.
Because when we talk about values, we have contribution values and values of self-interest. And since writing this book, I've become aware of a values index by a very smart man. I think he's since passed, but he lived in Israel, and he did this international index of values. It's called the Schwartz Values Index, and it's a giant wheel that shows values of contribution and values of self-interest. So the values of contribution relate to self-discipline. They relate to contribution. They relate to making sure that everybody's included, and the values of self-interest are aligned with stimulation, with achievement, with power, with security, values that we need. And so when we are leading and the values of self-interest become too prominent, and as a leader, sometimes business owners are aware of this and sometimes they are not. But as you lead more and more people, your actions are seen. And people won't be able to necessarily articulate it, but they will see the value judgments that you make, which are the decisions you make on a regular basis. And if you're making decisions based on values of self-interest that work counter to the needs, the desires, the self-interest of the others around you, they will sense that, they will become disengaged, and you will not get the higher levels of commitment. You will not get that team feeling of ecstasis where everybody is contributing to the higher goal. You will not get that feeling of falling on your face and having 7 other people come around you, pick you up, drag you through, get you to the other side where then you'll light up and be able to give back to them. You will not have that experience if you are only in it for yourself. And people will see that, and they see it with higher and higher resolution the more and more people you lead. And
I can see that. Yeah.
So so that becomes very important from a self-awareness perspective to say, how do I reinforce the values of contribution that matter most to me and that I feel matter most to my business and my people and the culture that I'm building? That is an important question and piece of self-reflection that I think every leader should ask themselves.
No question. And I can't help but try to translate this to an area where we delve into business owners' lives a lot, and that's when they're getting ready to not be business owners anymore. Eventually, they transition, right? You can't be a business owner forever. And it can be more difficult for some than for others. And I'm always kind of delving into the why of that. So why is it so hard to not call yourself a business owner anymore? And I think that maybe one of the answers is some of the things that you've just talked about is that, how was I defining success and what were the values that I was building up within myself as a business owner? Were they the ones that contribute to others or that contribute to yourself? I can certainly see a lot of that, and they have a really hard time sometimes coping with not having a team that they lead anymore per se, because they were getting so much out of it for themselves, with, some of them possibly toxic in some ways, I would say, the power, the money, all those types of things, and not necessarily being able to be, for instance, excited. I can see one from a contributory standpoint. I've seen business owners before who have transitioned out, and certainly in a father-son or a second generation type situation, where they've transitioned out, and then the company exploded with huge success and growth. And then you can kind of tell where, that when that becomes a sense of pride for that first generation, I think they probably had everything aligned pretty well, because I think one of the greatest examples of successful leadership is when you can step out of that position and somebody who you've groomed has actually taken it to the next level and been even more successful than you. And if you can turn around and look at that and say, wow, that's awesome, and be happy for them, and and still feel satisfied about what you were able to achieve, I think that's a real test.
Well, that's Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck. I write about that. I touch on her briefly in the book, but I really do love that. Instead of being jealous of others, and we all have jealousy,
sure,
and that's like, if you don't, you're not freaking human. But to recognize that and to figure out, how can I be, and I even just ask okay, I'm jealous of this person. Why am I jealous? And then ask, how can I be inspired by this person? How can I celebrate? Is there a way? Is this possible? Maybe the answer is no, but usually there's a very small part of you that can find that. After processing the emotions, the loss, the grief of not being able to achieve that yourself, or the or whatever, and and usually when you have that jealousy, that is a trigger. That's one of your values being triggered, and it's showing that there's a value that you care about, whether it is a shadow value, which is about self-preservation and self-interest, or sometimes it's a higher value, a contribution value, that is also being triggered, that isn't being expressed properly. Maybe you don't feel like you're getting it. You see the success, you're not being acknowledged. There's a lot of different layers that can come out of that. But I think I do agree with you, and that is the ultimate sign of integration and the sign of evolution, to let go of your business, to see it become even more successful than it could have ever gone without you. Because we all stand on the shoulders of giants. Even it took a lot for a business owner to found the business and bring it up to one certain place, and then and then it will take someone else. Like, it's a lot to go from 0 to 1, let alone like 1 to 2 is far easier. And then that transition, that transition piece that you talk about is so important, because I experienced that as a professional athlete moving into the business world well. And so I was gifted with the early pain of retirement and the early lack of purpose and searching for what that next thing is. And the gift I see of entrepreneurship and business building is personal development. It is perhaps the most intense form of personal development that might exist on this planet, other than maybe fatherhood or husbandhood, or I've not lived as a wife or a mother, but I'm sure I've seen it, is that taking on those responsibilities can really push you to the next level of evolution. But taking responsibility for an organization, for a business, for the cash flow, for the strategy, for the execution, for the team, for the culture, for yourself, that really forces you to mature, to go through, to not just be that 18-year-old who's now in their 20s, but to be that 30-year-old who's now solidly in their 40s and solidly in their 50s, and you're acting like a mature adult, and you've made it to that next stage of real adulthood. And so I think there's this transition that occurs when we leave. And I experienced this as an athlete. I'm sure this might resonate with another number of, if you have listeners who have transitioned from, entrepreneurship and business, because I've been involved with a number of projects where we actively did work with entrepreneurs who had transitioned, entrepreneurs, politicians, soldiers, athletes, transition from a career and into something, what that next thing is, and trying to find purpose. And what happens when you leave these places, 3 things are missing. one is your identity, and we talked about that. We talked about, our definition of success, our values. We identify as this business owner, this business leader, this entrepreneur, and now all of a sudden we're just, and that was something that happened before or long ago.
Yeah, who are we now?
Who are we? And the second one is structure. So we no longer have that structure that's driving us. It's not like we're showing up. We don't have that external push to to go through the week. We don't have the the weekly meetings, the quarterly plans, the annual plans, the deliverables to the board, if you have a board, if you're lucky enough to have a board, or if you've built one for yourself, or to the shareholders, or so you don't have the structure that's driving you forward. And the last one is community. So you don't have that community of people who are calling you up, who are respecting you, who are asking you for advice, who are who are listening to you, who are holding the bag when you need to solve something, who laugh at your jokes when you tell jokes. There's a great story of one of the guys that I coached, and he says, back when I was in power and I was leading, 400 people, I'd tell these jokes and everybody would laugh. And then after I retired, I'd tell the same jokes and no one would laugh. And finally someone said, hey man, you're just you're not
just not funny.
And people just laugh because you had the power, and people don't realize when they have the power that people will placate them. People see something that they want in the power that person has, and so you're given a lot more breaks. In certain regards, you're dealing with a ton of responsibility. You're dealing with a lot on your plate, but there are some pieces of leadership and the power that you accrue through that can sometimes creep in and tell you lies. And so this idea of transition from a business owner to to someone who's successful. You've been successful. You're a person of wealth. That's why they're working with you. So it's trying to figure out what is that new identity that you're looking for. What is that new structure that you're going to build? Do you build that with a personal trainer? Do you build that with a coach? Do you build that with a service group? Do you build that with how are you going to build that structure? And then what is the community? What is the community that you're going to slot into and give to and receive from?
Excellent.
And if you can think through identity, structure, and community, you can ease the pain of transition a little bit more. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but that's certainly one way to look at it that will give some perspective in the challenge of transition.
That's great, Adam. Great advice there. Another thing that you talk about in the book in an interesting way that I enjoyed was about stress and about and the way you talked about stress in the book is, hey, it's not a bad thing, it's a thing, and I love that because we are kind of in this realm right now within the world where we talk a lot about anxiety and we talk a lot about the negative aspects of stress, which certainly are there and are very important to talk about and very, very important to be able to know how to manage. But I mean, if you're going to go try to do something hard, it's going to be stressful, right? And that's okay.
Oh. Well, stress is neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. And I think that the stress can be there to help you, and the stress can help you grow. Just like I have a home gym in my dirty basement. I love training in dirty places because that's how I trained as an athlete.
Yeah, awesome.
And so I was lifting weights this morning. I think I was doing lat pull down and that kind of thing. But if I stress my muscles, that's a good thing. And they're a little bit sore, and then in 2 days from now, they're going to keep their strength. They're going to be a little bit stronger. And if I don't stress them, they're not going to stay strong. They're not going to, I'm not going to grow strength because of it. if we stay on the track of transition, this is an interesting insight that I've had since writing the book, is that how your status in your community, your status in your society, your status in the small little world that you've built around yourself has a strong relationship to the intensity of the stress that you feel. If because when you leave from being the leader and the owner of a business into the real world, you're just you move from being the big shot to just another human. Sometimes
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
there are places, and that loss of status definitely impacts the endorphins that we hold within our body, and the depressions that you feel are bigger when you're at a lower status. The anxiety that you feel is stronger when you're at a lower status, because as social creatures, we are very sensitive to where we sit within the pecking order.
Interesting.
This was used to great effect by my Olympic rowing coach. He was this British guy. He'd say very funny things like, "Hey, friendship." I'm doing my best British accent.
Okay, yeah, give it a shot there.
Friendships, they come and go, but gold medals, they last forever.
Okay.
and he was the kind of guy who would say, "Hey, if you throw 100 eggs against the wall, 8 won't break." And his idea was, I want to stress these people so much that they break, so that I can find the resilient ones.
Yeah, find the ones that
put
don't.
them in my boat, so that they can win Olympic gold. What he noticed was that he was constantly using the hierarchy as an external motivator in our training center. Every 6 to 8 weeks, we would be ranked from top to bottom, and you would know where you stood. Every single day, every single workout, we would train in 1-person and 2-person boats, and you would see yourself against these other people, and you'd know whether you're performing well or you're performing poorly. He wasn't overt about it. He wasn't, but he was structured enough so that people could see where they stood on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis within our training group. And the desire to climb the hierarchy is a strong one, especially when you're a young male. and so he used that to his motivational advantage when structuring the system. But I think even though as we mature and as we move into the later stages of life, these drives still exist, and so it's important to recognize that the stress of business, you might look at your stress at being the leader of the business, because again, no one will care about the business as much as you. You're the owner, so you're the top of the pecking order. So stress will affect you less than someone 2 levels down from you. And so there's an element of figuring out how to understand that and walk a little bit in the other people's shoes. I'm not saying that you fully curtail to that individual. With that compassion and empathy and understanding, you can push that person appropriately, lay the appropriate challenges for them, because every young person, every person developing needs the right challenge. They need to be shown their potential. If I didn't have a coach who challenged me, who pushed me, who pushed me to breaking and beyond, I wouldn't be here, and I'm so incredibly grateful to have had that experience. But I think there is an art form in that, in learning how to push the people we lead, obviously for ourselves, and I picture everyone listening to this podcast being very high performers. So obviously the insights in this book are 100% for you. I just wanted to give a little bit of context when we bring it into a leadership standpoint, a management standpoint, a culture building standpoint, because the hard thing about building a business, the hard thing about building a team is usually the people bit. And this is just a little insight to hopefully give you a bit more insight or nuance in how to approach people more effectively.
I really like it. Adam, your book is fantastic. It's called The Responsibility Ethic, and you sent this to me, which I appreciate, but I assume people can get this on Amazon or wherever, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great.
Yeah, wherever good books
Really
are found.
good. Really, really good. And then all of your thoughts on business leadership are just outstanding. I think we've got a lot of really good gems within our visit today for folks. I have one last question, because when I was reading through the book, and especially I really enjoyed, imagining y'all, four of you rowing across the Atlantic. In a previous life, I was a naval officer and, drove a ship around. And I thought that was kind of scary from time to time. But I cannot imagine trying to row from, I guess you were rowing from Africa to South America. Is that correct? Something like that across?
From Dakar to Miami. From Africa to America.
Oh, that's a long way. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you were doing all this. You were a young man, somewhat newly married with, I think, maybe a 2-year-old, and your wife was 7 months pregnant. I have to ask, so you go off to row across the Atlantic, and and Rebecca, your wife, is left with this young family. It's like, oh my gosh, how did you get that kitchen pass? Because I remember when our kids were that age, and I went off on a golf weekend trip, and I got the silent treatment for a little bit after that, I have to be honest. So I'm really curious as to, how you were able to do something so incredibly dangerous with a young family like that.
Well, it's there's lots of thoughts going around.
Yeah.
I think the first one is that I'll say that there's two questions. One is the type of question men usually ask me, which is how did you get the pass to actually do that? And then the other one from the women who ask is like, why and how did your wife even let you do that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because again, and we talk about this is that before the call, is that I made the decision to commit to my wife, commit to my family, to be a family man. That's the way I wanted to live my life. I was very excited to raise children. I'm not perfect, but at the same time, it's been probably one of the the deepest, most connective joys of my life. Raising a family. Even this book that I wrote for my children to read when they're in their 20s and 30s. So the question of how did my wife let me do this? And I'll say we talked about teamwork a lot during this conversation, and my wife and I were a very strong team. We've worked together. We've actually run our business together for a long time, and we found a lot of synergy in how we relate to one another. We are big believers in supporting one another in our dreams and supporting each other to do what we want to do. And so I think it came from a partnership, a sense of support that happened. There were certain values that we were aligned upon. I was rowing across the ocean to measure the state of our planet's oceans. A lot of people don't recognize or realize that our oceans are acidifying slowly, and there is a potential for massive climate and geological change if that that buffering capacity of the ocean changes. So we partnered with 8 different universities where we were conducting science. We were studying the planet, and my wife cares deeply about the planet. She cares about the environment. She writes. She wrote environmental policy when she was young. She worked with the Premier's office. The Premier, which is like the governor of a state, that's the Premier of our province. to do that when she was younger, and now she's working in the world of natural asset management, which is figuring out, how do you actually quantify the value of, of a foreshore, of an ecosystem, of the urban forest that exists within your city, and how does that actually contribute value to, to your city, to your people, and to the broader environment, and how can we actually, how can we quantify these externalities, which in the past have been very difficult to put upon balance sheets. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that we share values around, the environment and the earth, and that was part of the mission of this journey. Two, from a safety perspective, rowing across an ocean is less dangerous than riding a motorbike. So the
I'm not 100% buying that, but okay. As long as she bought it, then that's fine, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you can just look at the statistics of the percentage of people who die riding a motorbike versus the percentage of people who die rowing across an ocean.
Okay.
And again, we went through one of the worst disasters you could have on the ocean, and all four of us came out, healthy and shaken up, but relatively unscathed. And so we were aligned on, from a safety perspective, so it's not as dangerous as you might initially think. We were aligned from an environmental values perspective, and we were aligned from, an achievement and supporting one another perspective. Mm-hmm. Plus, when we got married, she kind of knew what she was getting into. She was marrying this, adventurous, high energy, big dreaming, hardworking guy, and you have to take pieces of one with the other if you're going to make a relationship work. You can't have it all. If you want if you want to have a relationship with me, you're going to have to take the whole me. And so this was, I suppose, my perspective too, is that this is my life.
This is what I do. Yeah, I got you.
This is what I do, and this is what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. So there was an element of it wasn't an ultimatum and a hard negotiation. I'm sure had we had the difficult discussion and she was able to present something logically and emotionally that would move me, we would have changed. But
sure.
There wasn't. And we had gone through, and then the other piece was just, logistically, after the Olympics had stopped, I started planning this ocean row. And when we were planning the ocean row, we were going on expeditions. It took about 4.5 years to build this project.
Wow.
And we had our first kid, and the project was still being built, and then it got delayed, and things were moving along, and I was building my motivational speaking career, and we were building our life together just as a young couple in our in our early 30s. And this project just kept going. And a lot of what people don't understand, especially if you're young and you don't have the resources to finance it yourself, so much of an adventure is the strategic planning, the strategy, the building of spreadsheets, having tons of meetings, and there's a very large logistical component to it. So we were planning it, and we got to a point where she's like, I need to have another baby. It's time for us to have another baby. And I said, you realize that I've been planning this ocean row for the last 3 years, and this is going to happen. And she said, you know what, it's going to happen, but if you can row across an ocean, I can grow a baby. This is let's be honest here.
Yeah.
So there's an element of strength and toughness and independence, on her part, as well as just, love and support and, and lifting up. And again, in the same way, I'm, for those of you who've been in highly functional marital or long-term relationships, you can testify to it that it is like this feeling of ecstasis, where when you fall down, the other partner lifts you up and then takes you to the other side, where you get that golden light and then can give back tenfold. And it has gone back and forth like that, in our relationship for many years. So that's that's a very long-winded answer.
No, but obviously,
how did you get the hall pass? But
yeah.
It was about relationship. It was about aligned values. It was about having the difficult and long conversations and finding common ground. It was about teamwork.
Yeah, and y'all just obviously are just a great team, and congratulations on all the great success that y'all are having, and in working with other, with business teams and getting them to the next level. Really exciting work that you're doing, Adam. I feel so privileged that you came on to the podcast today to talk to our folks about all these important topics. As a follow-up, what's a good way, if somebody wanted to talk to you about, doing a speaking engagement, or even just bounce some things off of you with regard to their team to see where they could get some help, what is a good way for somebody to get in contact with you?
Well, a good way, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's
Okay.
probably the easiest way. Most people are LinkedIn these days. That's where I spend most of my social time. So that's probably the quickest and easiest, most direct way to get me.
Okay.
You can also contact us through the website. Through the website, you go through the filter of my wife. So beware, be forewarned. She's not my assistant, so treat her with respect. We've got some clients who don't do that.
Oh, wow.
And but I'd say LinkedIn or our website, which is valuesdrivenachievement.com, valuesdrivenachievement.com, and those are the best ways to reach out.
Great.
And it would be wonderful. It would be a privilege to connect. And if people get the book or want to learn more about it, I'm always, I get a note, every few days of someone who's read the book and has gained something from it. So that's one of the privileges, and it serves one of my core values of generous impact, because, the book was written a labor of love to support, the self-leadership of people who want to grow, to be better, to give more, achieve more. Always happy to talk about whatever.
That's great. Well, thanks, Adam. So on LinkedIn, that would be Adam Kreek, and Kreek is spelled with a K, Kreek, for those of you who are listening. And we'll certainly put all that in the show notes as well, so that if somebody wants to get in contact with Adam, you can certainly do it. So thanks so much for being on the show. For everybody out there watching, we really appreciate you tuning in. We try to put one of these out about every other week. Our focus is on the business owner and the business owner journey. And if you ever think of maybe a story or an interesting person that you think that we ought to interview, certainly always just drop me a note and let me know. We're here to provide this type of content and basically enhance your lives. We hope everybody out there has a great day and a great week. Take care.